Hello, and welcome to the Exponential Growth Podcast, powered by Analyst Investors. I'm your host, David Olivencia, co-founder of Analyst Investors, and a passionate advocate for leveraging innovation and technology to drive success. In this podcast, we'll dive into the strategies that top leaders, investors, and entrepreneurs are using to navigate and thrive in this era of accelerating technological change. Whether you're looking to lead more effectively, make smarter investments, or understand how to harness disruptive technologies for exponential growth, this podcast is for you. Each episode will feature conversations with visionary thinkers, industry pioneers, and innovative leaders who are redefining what's possible in today's rapidly evolving world. So if you're ready to start and stay ahead of this curve, let's get started. This is Exponential Growth. All right, everyone. Well, hey, welcome to another edition of the Exponential Growth Podcast. Today, I have a very special guest, somebody I've known 20-ish years. You know, I've been angel investing now probably 15 years or so. I'm leading I'm a general partner in a venture capital firm. And when I trace my early days of getting interested in private equity and investing and this whole world of capital and it's kind of one person, and that is my guest that's with me here today, Carmen Ortiz-McGhee. Carmen, welcome to the Exponential Growth Podcast. How are you?
David, thank you so much for having me. It has been lovely knowing you, watching your journey, all the incredible impact you've had. So it's a special treat to be here with you today.
Oh, great. Well, in life you come across certain people that kind of give you insight, advice, and share that. And, I remember our conversations 20 years ago, you being kind of in this whole emerging manager, capital allocation, private equity
Mm-hmm.
space, and me just being fascinated by it. You grow up relatively humble. I think you will jump more into and you see the amount of capital that gets allocated out there in the world, definitely in the United States. It's just an insane amount of money.
Right.
And you start to look at, well, where's it getting allocated? How's it getting allocated appropriately? From a society perspective and all that kind of stuff. So you really opened my eyes there, and obviously we're here today. So
Yes.
let's talk about you, Carmen. I know bits and pieces of the journey, but give us a little bit of your story and a little bit of your leadership journey, so our audience can find out all the your cool journey.
Well, I again appreciate it. So yes, my journey, and you're right. My journey started very humbly, right? I'm the only daughter of a single Puerto Rican mother who left everyone and everything she knew behind to pursue a career in, of all things, military intelligence in the
Oh
1970s,
wow!
right?
Oh wow!
So you can imagine una boricua, pursuing quite a non-traditional path for her. And so there were no boardrooms, right? The environment was one where uncertainty was pretty constant and resilience was required for survival, right? It was that sort of an existence. And I grew up watching her build our life through sheer determination and grit. She didn't have a roadmap or a network of people who could just hand her opportunities, right? What she did have was this incredible belief in herself and her ability to provide for us. And that lesson stayed with me because for me that sort of translated to this power of lift, of sort of defying gravity, right? And later I went on to the University of Virginia, and over time built my career in this financial services space. And all along the way, I was often finding myself in rooms where people didn't expect to see someone like me. And when I think about, my leadership journey, that could have been really intimidating, right? There were rooms that I remember early, right around the time that we met, in fact, going into rooms of, people who had these double, JD MBA degrees from Ivy League schools and who had done this amazing stuff that I had never even heard of, right? And it was definitely intimidating. It
Totally,
was,
totally, right?
right? I mean,
Kind of also stretches
Jenny
you a
from
little
the
bit,
block, right?
Yeah, it's intimidating, but it also kind of stretches you, and I guess when you get what they say, dime con quién andas, right?
Right.
You start getting used to it and more
Mhm.
comfortable, but please continue.
Yeah. No, it's true. And I was actually, that's exactly where I was going because it also became really clarifying, right? And I realized through exposure to these people that leadership, unlike what we thought it was, it's not about perfection or just the credentials. Credentials help, certainly, right? But what it's most about is consistent movement forward, even if you don't feel ready, even if the path ahead isn't clear. And I was always impacted by that notion of constant forward progress, whether we had all the information available or not. And so, across my career, whether it was in corporate leadership or in the work that I do today at NAIC, that those principles, right? Those things guide me. They help me think about leadership and impact and where we're going to take the organization. And I think, a question we often ask ourselves is, do I feel ready? Well, what we should actually be asking ourselves is, am I willing to make the choice to keep moving forward through the morass, that all the madness that we deal with, particularly as leaders, day in and day out?
Yeah, and Carmen, so some of our listeners, they may not know what NAIC is and a little bit of the
Mhm.
financial background. Can you just
Sure.
give them a thumbnail on what NAIC is and kind of your role within there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I always forget to introduce myself. So NAIC, National Association of Investment Companies, we're a 55-year-old trade association that advocates on behalf of diverse-owned alternative investment firms. And what that means is, buyout, private credit, infrastructure, real estate, venture capital, and all of our members are those kinds of investment firms that are owned by women and people of color. And we focus on things like access to capital, advocacy, education, and how do we help people advance in their careers and ultimately launch their own firms. And so my role in the organization is COO. And that, of course, I oversee all operations, but I also oversee all programs, initiatives, marketing, membership, research, and the like.
Yeah, that was fascinating. And one of the things that, goes back to, when we first met 20 years ago, just like real estate and the private equity and, private credit and all these kind of
Mhm.
things. What people, can you just give to the extent you can? It's like how big, like
Oh,
how big, like how much money are we talking about gets
yeah,
managed and invested and across some of these asset classes?
yeah.
Just any quick numbers. I
Yeah,
mean, I
so
have a
I'll
couple, but
tell you, I'll give you a couple of statistics. The total industry is somewhere around, depending on where the market is, right? Somewhere between 80 and 90 trillion dollars.
with a T, everyone who's
Massive.
listening,
With a
a
T.
T,
Exactly.
trillion.
Trillion dollars. Our membership, we have around 175 member firms at any point in time. They manage just short of half of 1 billion dollars. And we represent the lion's share of the private market space for diverse managers. And what is true is that of those trillions of dollars, women and people of color manage less than 2%. I think the statistics is somewhere around 1.7% of all of that available capital is managed by women and people of color. So it is a massive, massive industry, and growing all the time. And while that sort of percentage that I talk about, and it's of course what we advocate around, is managed by a very, very small number of managers, of diverse managers.
So cool industry, huge opportunities, and
Yeah,
very admirable, admirable
absolutely. Well,
work that
it's
you're
the
doing.
engine, right? It's the engine of innovation and problem solving and ecosystem changing. This industry is where the fuel for that, the capital for that comes from.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, and I'm in the Capital Fuels, all these amazing companies, right, that are happening, right? These AI companies, real estate
Yeah.
deal, all this kind of stuff. It's amazing the impact of capital, which is things that I learned from you early on, right? I was a
Yeah.
tech guy and all that kind of stuff, but really, when you take
Yeah.
tech and capital together, you're seeing a lot of these great innovations that are out there. Okay,
Yeah.
so you just launched and released a book.
I
Can you
did.
tell the audience what the book's title is, a little bit about the book, and give us an insight? And why the heck did you write the book?
Yeah. It's such a great question. Well, so the title of the book is The Bumblebee Blueprint: Tiny Truths for a Bigger, Braver Life. And it is a personal accounting of stories that have occurred to me in various aspects of my life. So whether it was my youth, my becoming a mother, my professional life, or my personal married life and marriage, I share my own stories, and I don't share them because you know me, David, right? I don't think that my story is more important than anyone else's or more compelling. But what I have learned, because I do, as you know, public speaking, what I realized is that there's something really powerful that happens when people hear stories that help them see possibilities in their own lives, hope in their own lives, the ability to navigate, and maybe some, tips and tricks and tools for navigating through complexity, right? And that's one of the core lessons in the book that I hope people take away is how to navigate forward through complexity and a lot of, I think, great leadership understanding as well. And so I talked about this about when I referenced my mother because it was such a core influence for me. But it's that belief is a leadership skill, right? Which sounds a bit hokey. People think about it as, a personality trait. You either have belief in yourself and in things that they'll turn out a certain way or you don't. But I view it more as a discipline. I think that
Yeah,
we as leaders, right, we have to often believe in a future that we can't quite see, right? We
yeah,
build these strategies and these plans and these ideas because we're moving forward towards something that we believe will happen if we engage in these behaviors. Uh,
yeah,
Another lesson is the importance of small, consistent actions, right? When you think about your career, technology, investing, any sort of leadership, people are often looking for these big breakthrough moments, the unicorns, right? But what I think everyone would admit is that those breakthrough moments, those dramatic, successes that we see, the overnight successes that took 10 years to get there, it's a result of cumulative behaviors. And it's the sort of showing up consistently, the making thoughtful decisions, moving forward, even when the progress we're seeing is small, right? And that sort of leads to a third lesson, and I'll kind of wrap it up. One more after this that I'll share. But it's that progress beats perfection. And I often see in business so many talented people that delay action because they're waiting to feel fully prepared, right? But leaders, we don't get to operate in I mean, how often do we get to operate in perfect conditions when everything is right and comfortable and easy and smooth? And it's the ones who have the greatest impact that are the ones who are willing to move forward while they're still, receiving information from the environment, taking things in, but moving the whole organization forward. And then the last one that I'll save just because it's one of my favorites is this whole idea of collective strength, right? In the book, of course, I call it the hive. But I don't think that anyone builds anything meaningful alone. And whether it's in leadership, whether it's in your industry of technology and investing, our ecosystems matter, our mentors matter, our partnerships and relationships matter. And so I hope that folks will take away the importance of building that sort of hive collective around them.
yeah. No, those are some great ones. I wrote them down, and I had a couple just thoughts on them. You talk about belief, and I almost think, like, I also like the belief and or conviction, right? Like, I
Yes.
believe in this, and I'm going, and I know it may not be perfect, but we're going
Yeah.
in this direction, right? And
Right.
or look, I place bets on a startup, right? Take
Yeah.
capital, hard-earned capital from folks, and I make I have belief and a conviction,
You
and you're
have
going
to, right?
kind of all in. You're all in on them. So
Yeah.
I think that it is and it is somewhat of a grounding fact. If you waffle, then you just kind of waffle. You're just waffling through life, right? And so you're moving in
Yeah.
a direction. So I love that. I
Yeah.
love the small constant actions, right? Which is just getting like 1% better every day, and
Hmm.
that's across all dimensions,
Yeah.
right? Your health, with your family, your
What is it?
work.
The atomic behaviors? What is
Yeah,
the
yeah. Atomic habits, maybe atomic
atomic
habits.
habits?
Well, atomic habits, yeah.
Exactly.
So that's a great one. And then I
Mhm.
love the progress is greater than perfection. Like, and true. So many people,
Yeah.
especially in corporate, I think less in the startups because you gotta move and
You have
but in
to.
corporate, oh my gosh, it would be like it had to be perfect, and
Yeah.
it's like it's really
Yeah.
and
It's like decision paralysis, right?
totally,
They're right. Everything
totally,
has to be
totally,
perfect. We've got to get all the right answers. All the boxes has to be checked before we can move forward.
totally.
And it creates stagnation.
And if you're and we're environments now where you're really not going to have all the information. AI and things are making things move a lot faster, so you got to move. That's a vital one. And then your last
Mhm.
one around, call it collective strength, the hive.
Yeah.
It's networking. I mean, that's a bit of just networking, right? And
Mhm.
it's your network, and it's and I wrote the book on that, and,
But
and,
not
and
just
as well.
networking. You wrote a
Yeah,
fantastic book around it. And I think that it's not just networking for networking's sake, right? Which is one of
totally.
the critical points, right? It's really building intentional, strategic, meaningful, and genuine connections in your network that are reciprocal in nature.
Totally. Well, that's is a bit of the networking. It's like, what's the if you're in it for you, it doesn't work. You can't always give it one way to the other person, right? It's got to be
Right.
kind of genuine, and that makes it. So those were great, and I'm sure there's others, and some of these stories. I know some of your stories. I don't know all your stories, so I have to
Yeah.
have to
Well,
dig
there's
in
more in the
and
book for sure. You'll
yeah.
definitely feel like you know me better
Oh,
after
totally,
reading it.
totally, totally, totally. Anything else on, uncertainty and, leaders' mind, based on your experiences, maybe what you touch on a little bit of book, how
Yeah.
leaders navigate uncertainty. And we're
Yeah.
and we're in some uncertain times, by the way. You got geopolitical things, you got AI coming rapid. A lot of
Yes.
people are scared, a lot of jobs are cut, capital's
Yeah.
figuring out where the heck to go.
Yeah.
Capital's moving out of places really quick, faster than
Hmm.
ever before. What
Right.
what's uncertainty's here, right? So what does your book and your life experiences talk about how we should deal with uncertainty?
Yeah. I mean, look, and not only is it here, but it's no longer occasional, right? We're not seeing like spikes of uncertainty. It's constant. Markets are constantly shifting. Technology is not just accelerating change, but the pace of change, how fast things are changing. And like the entire industries are kind of transforming faster than organizations can keep up. So I think that in these environments, I think that leaders need three things. I think first they need clarity of purpose. And I think that's the thing. The purpose is the thing that can't change. You were alluding to this a bit earlier, right around conviction, but conditions are going to change. They're going to change rapidly, and strategies are going to evolve. But the purpose of what you're doing, that should not change, right? So leaders who really ground themselves in understanding the why behind their work, they've got the ability to adapt the how around that, given all the new information without losing direction. I also think it's this idea that we keep talking about of sort of, an orientation around progress, right? If you look at bumblebees, if you've ever watched a bumblebee fly around a garden, you know that they don't fly in straight lines, right? They zig, they zag, they pivot, they twist, they turn. They move in really, really dynamic patterns, and they're always adjusting as they're gathering information from their environment. And I think that's a really, really enlightening metaphor for what we find ourselves in as leaders today. I don't think we have the ability or the luxury of being rigid planners. I think we have to become really adaptive navigators of all of the dynamics that are at play and all of the changes that are consistently happening around us. And we have to make it our business to gather that information, adjust course accordingly, but always keep moving in the direction of that initial purpose that I said. And then the last thing is, again, decision courage, right? In these environments, waiting for perfect data, waiting for feeling comfortable, waiting for full and perfect information is going to stagnate us, and we're going to get left behind. I mean, AI alone, right? If you don't know, if you have not become AI conversant at this point, you're woefully behind the curve. And if your business isn't becoming AI native quickly, you're going to be left behind and could ultimately become irrelevant. And so I think that decision courage and realizing that confidence doesn't have to come from knowing everything, but it does have to come from trusting our ability to adjust as we get more information and being committed to the course of action in the direction that we're going. Not the course of action, but the ultimate goal that we're moving towards. And I think that's, it's a critical sort of element of the book, of the Bumblebee Blueprint. It's leadership is motion. It's not flawless motion, but it's purposeful motion.
Right. So anchored on a purpose with
Yes.
progress and the
Yes.
courage, right, to kind of
Yes.
go there and
We
drive
have
through
to,
that.
these times require courage.
Yeah. And I was thinking, and two, I think with one of the things you were just thinking, speaking through this is like two also leaders, right? That we also have more information than ever before to lead and I think, you can, as you were talking about the bumblebee, right? It's
Yeah.
sensing, it's getting information. You can also do scenario, like now you have so much information in AI, you can do scenario planning. Hey, what happens
Yes.
if A happens? What happens if B happens? Well, what
Yeah.
happens if C happens? Well, what would
Yes.
I do if A happens? What's the probability A is going to happen? Well, if this
Right.
happens, what's you can like run a bunch of scenarios and then make a decision, right? You can't just sit there
Yeah.
and run scenarios all day because like to your
I was
point, you
going to
got
say, because the other side of that is too much
yeah, yeah,
information,
yeah,
right?
totally,
That then
totally,
freezes us because we don't know
yeah, totally,
what path to follow.
totally. So you got to take action because you can
You
do
have to have
analysis
courage,
paralysis.
right? And
Exactly.
conviction. Absolutely.
So we're both in the world of
Yeah.
investment. Me more recently, I think, but well, I guess you're always an investor, right? You're
Yeah.
investing your time, you're
Yeah.
investing whatever, but more in the call it private equity, venture capital, and this whole
Yeah.
emerging manager space. So you've got a
Yeah.
lot of experience in that area. What do you see as and emerging managers, right? And just maybe for the audience, maybe just like what is an emerging manager?
Yeah.
Why is it important?
Yeah.
What do you see, from your viewpoint around emerging managers and maybe even tie it to a little bit, if you can, with your book.
Yeah. So, so first of all, the definition. So, emerging managers are either newer or smaller. The traditional definitions center around whether it's fund one, two, or three, generally. There's not one hard and fast definition, but generally this is accepted. They're funds one, two, or three. They're usually a first-time strategy, and they're sub 2 billion in assets under management. So in the total capital that they manage, the firm size is under 2 billion. Why they matter is because this is how new talent, new ideas, new perspectives, and new opportunities enter the investment space. It's where a lot of the innovation happens. So it's incredibly important for these emerging managers to have an on-ramp into the industry. And I think one of the things that you were asking me is kind of what am I seeing around emerging managers in this environment that is so um, uncertain and chaotic.
Yeah.
One of the things we obviously work with hundreds of investment firms, as I talked about earlier. And one thing is really, really clear, right? The challenge is not that there's a lack of talent or even a lack of stated interest in the emerging and diverse manager talent. The challenge is that too many of the structural dynamics that govern the whole capital formation process still favor familiarity and pattern recognition and existing networks over genuine discovery, right? A lot of the institutional investors and asset owners are taxed and their bandwidth is limited. So they lean into these things of familiarity and pattern recognition and people they know because it's the path of less friction. But emerging managers and diverse managers in that dynamic, what happens to them is that they get asked to do more to prove that they're institutionally ready. While their counterparts who are, they might have more familiar pedigrees, come from more, familiar backgrounds from the right schools and, all of these, they might be granted the benefit of presumed credibility earlier in the process than an emerging manager or a diverse manager might. And so I don't want it to sound like the shifts that are required there are just like in the attitudes of the people who are making these decisions. They're also procedural. We need to develop more intentional sourcing. We need more thoughtful underwriting of newer firms. We also need the willingness and openness, to your point, to build conviction before a manager looks exactly like everyone else that we've ever funded. And we need to understand, access isn't just about getting a meeting. It's not just about sitting in a room or on a Zoom. It's about getting a real opportunity to be evaluated, a fair process, and the opportunity to build track record at scale. And I think that's incredibly important. And in some respects, it's shifting, right? I think right now, because of the tremendous market uncertainty and all of the things that are happening geopolitically, there's a flight towards the familiar. That's what happens. It's human nature. But I think that there are absolutely pockets that are sticking to this idea that, that in these emerging managers, there's tremendous opportunity and alpha to be gleaned, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and alpha, for those who are just listening, it's like returns, right? If you're going to invest in something, you're getting outsized returns or return better than normal is alpha. And look, so to the listeners, like myself and my co-general partner Adela Cepeda, we're emerging managers, right? We're fortunate in that we have somewhat of a pedigrees, right? I have Notre Dame and Adela's got Harvard and Booth and our team, but it is the hardest. So we're emerging managers. It's our fund one, right? We've got some amazing limited partners. Some are, public bank, but it's the hardest thing I've done in raising, when you not only us, but all these other emerging managers out there, right? It's not dissimilar, right? You have to raise money and you have to raise, in case millions and tens of millions, and maybe in some cases, fifties of millions and hundreds of millions, right?
Yeah. So
and then
you're making a really great point, David, and I'm sorry to jump in, but the thing is that raising capital, to your point, it's not just about performance, right? You can have a fantastic track record, but if you don't have the relationships or the networks and the access, and you guys benefit from that because of your longstanding tenure in the space and Adela's success in the industry and all that. So you guys are not starting necessarily, at first base, but so many managers are, right? And so that's why organizations like NAIC and Angeles and New America Alliance and all of these others are so important, because they provide these managers the opportunity to build those relationships and to get the visibility that's required.
Yeah, and so like. And so if anybody out there who's listening knows or finds or comes across an emerging manager, it is tough. It is tough, and give them some encouragement.
Yes, 100%.
That would be mine. So Carmen, the capital markets, right? So now you got, all this dynamic. You've been in the industry, a while. And 10 years out, what excites you? What do you see? What are some innovations out there? Give us a little bit of a crystal ball. I don't know, 10 years, 5 years out. It's like 5 years is like the new 50 years now, but what do you see out in the future?
Look, I don't know if anyone really has a crystal ball. I don't think I don't think even the most contrary to what's being said in the news, I don't think anyone saw what's happening today coming.
No.
So, I won't claim that level of visibility. If I did, I need to productize it, right? And commercialize it. But what I do see that I see three things that are really, really exciting. The first is expansion of private markets. I think private markets are only going to continue to expand despite the challenges that are facing. We're seeing new sources of capital enter the space. We're seeing more family offices enter in a much more thoughtful and intentional way. We're seeing hospital health systems and insurance companies, and now this whole notion of retailization
Yeah.
of private markets, right? There, so that
So,
this
so like for those that, and so retailization, like for those who are listening and you're not accredited investor, you could
yeah,
potentially buy into, I don't know, my fund or other
yeah,
funds that
your
Carmen represents
401ks,
in your 401ks, right? You can,
yeah.
yeah. Or
Yeah, so
maybe at
think
some
about
point
the
even
massive
direct,
amount of
right?
capital that makes
Yeah.
available, right? So yeah, so the expansion of private markets is going to continue, and what we're going to continue seeing in that vein is more sophisticated capital strategies, more specialized funds, I think more global collaboration. I think all of that is going to continue to happen as more capital comes into the space, and of course, more scrutiny, right? More regulatory scrutiny is gonna come in, which we don't get excited about in private markets for sure. But I
Oh.
think that all of that will come together and lead to continued expansion and exciting dynamics. The other thing I see, and you know this more than I do, is the democratization of knowledge and networks. So technology is making information, education, and access more available than ever before. So talented founders, talented managers, leaders who may have historically been geographically or socially distant from some of those traditional power centers now have new ways to engage or at least understand how best to engage. And then the last and maybe the most exciting thing that I'll talk about. And it's funny because some of the things that I say fly in the face of this, but I'm really excited about this new generation of leaders that we're seeing in the investment space and even more broadly. I think they think more about impact. I think they're more, if I can call it obsessed with innovation. They're also really focused on genuine long-term value creation in much more integrated ways, right? And so I think that the people who understand that their success, it's not that success generally, it's not just about their individual achievement. It's about all of the ecosystems we build and the things that we invest in, how they impact the broader infrastructure and environment and communities, right? That we serve and have the opportunity to impact. But I believe that the next decade will belong to those leaders, the ones who are willing to move, adapt, collaborate, and then, to continue the metaphor, build strong hives around them.
Oh, there you go. You have to tie it to the hives, have to tie it to the
That's
bumblebee,
right.
No, well, look, so there was like, this expand, some of these I knew, but I like the way you crystallize it, right? This like
Yeah,
over the next decade, just the expansion and giving access to these private
yes,
markets, I think
yeah,
that is going to be a game changer. Even like
yeah,
some bit of tokenization. I mean, there's so
yeah,
much things coming
so
together.
much.
I love the democratization thing. I kind of knew it, but it wouldn't have been the first thing. But it is true. Like, there was a time where it's like who you knew, where you went to
Yeah,
school, you get the capital, and it just stayed in these circles. I mean, that's kind of like
yeah,
a bit of
yeah,
Silicon Valley.
right.
Now, a good idea, a hard worker can come from anywhere, and it lowers the barriers. There's
That's
still a bit
right.
of them that are there, but if you have
Yeah,
a good idea and you're going to work hard and you're innovative and you know how to use the tools, you can be just as, and with AI you can create teams of AI
yes,
agents, right? And just knock it
yeah,
out. So I
yeah,
totally agree there. And then, yeah, these next generational leaders are amazing. I think
they
the
are.
ecosystems and the hives that they're going to build are great.
Yeah, yeah.
So no, that I totally agree, and thanks for sharing that. Carmen, I know you got a lot of things going on. How do people get the Bumblebee blueprint?
So the Bumblebee Blueprint is available on Amazon and Google Books and Ingram Spark and all of the places. So they're able to see it there. You can go on my website and get it. It's carmenortizmcghee.com. And you'll get all sorts of information there and speaking information and other updates. And then, of course, I'm always available and super active on LinkedIn and Instagram. So all of those places are places that you can find the book and me.
Ah, well, excellent. Well, hey, for those who are listening, get out there and grab yourself a copy. Follow Carmen on Instagram, hot on the gram, and LinkedIn. And no, just an amazing. It's been an amazing 20 years, just warming up. So much, so many great things ahead. Carmen, thank you for jumping on the pod and continued success.
Thank you for having me, David. This was so much fun.
All right.